Good morning. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by a returning Ryan, who's been off on his summer holidays over the last fortnight plus. Ryan, how are you doing on this fine Thursday morning?
Things are good. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me. How are you doing? How have things been in my
Ev-
absence?
yep, everything's been fine. Celtic have signed a couple of players, I think, in your absence. They've played a couple of friendlies. There's been a fair amount of chat. How are you feeling about the direction of the summer as you've been watching from afar?
Quietly confident. Yeah. I know that there's different views on the way that Celtic have been conducting their business. I think it's important to remember that it's still only the 10th of July. We've still got another just under a month until Celtic play their first competitive fixture of the season. I think they're doing okay. They've got brought in what 5, 6 new signings so far already this season. So I think they're going nicely. I think we just want to see a little bit more quality in the players that we sign. Those immediate first team players coming through. I know we've got Negrin through the door. Kieran Tierney obviously coming back. It's a massive boost. But let's see what Celtic can do over the course of these next few weeks as we gear up into the start of the new season.
I'll tease this question. Is Shin Yamada the kind of quality that we're talking about? We'll talk a bit more about Shin Yamada over the course of this show because he looks like he will be one of Celtic's next signing, if not Celtic's next signing. Various media outlets reporting across the world that Shin Yamada is on his way to Celtic and that it's only a matter of time until this move is finalised. If you are unaware, Shin Yamada is currently on international duty with the Japan national team. It is the full Japan national team, but it's the time of year where they like to do a little bit of experimentation with their senior squad. So it's not wholly established players in the setup at the moment. They're playing in something called the East Asian Cup, I think it's called, which is China, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Japan. It's a four-team tournament at the moment. So Japan are currently over there. I think they play China on Saturday, and I think they play South Korea on Tuesday. And the belief is that Shin Yamada will then make his way to Celtic, complete his medical, go through the finalisation of his sign-in, and join Celtic at some point next week. So he won't be in Portugal. I don't think he'll be flying to Portugal. This looks like one where he'll formalise his move next week and join up with the squad, potentially ahead of the Newcastle game, but certainly from then onwards for the rest of the pre-season. There'll be a lot of chat about a lot of speculation about what this move means, especially in the context of Inamura joining and Brendan Rodgers making it quite clear that perhaps that was one for the club rather than someone who could come in and affect his first team immediately. I think Shin Yamada, what I would say, Ryan, just before I let you come in, is he's undoubtedly more established in the J League than Inamura is. So he's very much more of the profile of what Celtic were buying in Japan before in terms of Kyogo, in terms of Maeda, in terms of Hatate. He's playing for one of the top clubs in Japan. He's played there for a couple of years now. He's come out of the university system and he's had his 2 or 3 years experience that you would expect. And actually, before Celtic's interest in him, he was one of the players tipped from the J League to make a move to Europe this summer. So I just want to put that out there just to frame this conversation. I don't think this is an Inamura situation. He is undoubtedly more established. But what is your gut feeling on this one, Ryan?
My gut feeling is that if this was to have happened 6 months ago, I don't think anybody would have been complaining about this deal. Just looking at the season he had prior to his current season, I know they're halfway through it at the moment, but the J League season that he had last season was really, really strong. One of the best players in the J League. I think it was 19 goals in the league, 22 in all competitions. So one of the top players in Japan's top flight. Admittedly, it's been a more difficult season trying to recapture that form. I think he's only got something like 3 or 4 goals this season, but he's impressed the Celtic scouts. If you're going by the report that was circulating yesterday, Celtic have been watching him for a good amount of time, and they're prepared to maybe get him at, I don't want to say maybe at a more opportune moment when he's maybe not in the best form, that he can come out, feel a different scenario, feel a different environment. Maybe he needs that change in his career. Maybe he's outgrown the team that he's playing for, which might be down to which may explain the statistics that he's had this season. But 6 months ago, everybody would have been raving about this deal. He's a good player. You can tell he's a good player. I'm looking forward to this one if it does go over the line. I'm choosing to be positive about this and look at last season rather than this season, and I've got no doubt that he can up those levels, especially under a good manager like Brendan Rodgers.
Again, there'll be a few cynical eyes that look at the transfer fee, which is reported in the range of £1.5 million. I tend to look at the profile of the player and try to figure out the Celtic aren't just buying players just because they have no hope for them whatsoever. There's always something Celtic like about a player when they sign a player. So you try to get into like what they see in Yamada, what kind of profile he has. As you say, I think 19 goals in the J League last year is a strong sign that he has ability and can hit form. It would be. And so when I look at his profile, I've looked into kind of how he plays. He's very much a penalty box striker, Ryan.
Yeah.
He's very much someone of that mould who will play as a centre forward. He's not a hybrid winger. He's not anything else. He's a pure centre forward who has finishing instincts, looks to break free of that defensive line. I don't want to make the comparison to Kyogo because I think Kyogo was actually a special talent, and I think that's unfair on Yamada coming in and etc. I think Kyogo had an X factor that I'm not sure Yamada has, and I won't know until I see him in a Celtic jersey. But he is of that ilk in the sense he's very much sniffing around the box. He can be isolated in games at times, as we've seen with Kyogo. But I think he has those moments in him where he can be a match winner for a team. And I think that's what Celtic are looking at here as someone with instinctive finishing ability who has pace and acceleration, who can punish opposition teams. And I think that's what they're looking at in Yamada, that he can be the penalty box striker that this Brendan Rodgers team needs.
Yeah, and I'm quite happy that this avenue now for Japanese players is still available for the J League players to make that move to Celtic, because there've been a couple of transfer windows where no players had came from the J League. Maybe Brendan Rodgers was going to look elsewhere, but with Inamura coming in, who's more of a project player, you could say. Yamada's definitely not. He's 25 years old, coming into the sort of prime of his striking career. Still young for a striker, especially a Japanese striker, given the way that they go through university, some other players. So, Rio Hatate was only 24. Sometimes he plays like a 21, 22-year-old in terms of the way he plays. But Yamada, I've watched a couple of his, the scrappy goals there as well. As much as there's good finishes, there's scrappy goals. And I like to see that just as much as the well-taken finishes, because he's going to have those sort of chances in the Scottish Premiership where it's going to be busy in the box. He's going to have to take a stab at it and maybe get an ugly goal, or a so-called ugly goal. So if he can score them, can score headers as well. I've seen a couple of headers in his highlights reels, then he looks as if he'll be a good fit if and when he gets up to his full fitness and he gets up to his full acclimatisation. Because I think the relief is that Celtic won't immediately need to rely on him, because they've got the likes of Daisen Maeda and Adam Maeda who will be more acclimatised than him. He can sort of develop in the background alongside Callum Osmond as well, and then they can come and make an impact as well. But you're slowly but surely seeing that new look forward line with Callum Osmond and then Shin Yamada, you'd think, in the next couple of weeks. So it's always exciting to see new strikers, and it looks like a when rather than an if when it comes to Yamada.
So when I'm thinking about the striking department, I understand what you're saying about Callum Osmond. I'm still unsure what role Osmond will play at Celtic over the next season, especially like this initial season. I have doubts about that, especially with Yamada coming in, because then suddenly you've got Maeda, Ida and Yamada, and that looks like it might be the striking group that Brendan Rodgers is going with. If we're also thinking about recruiting wingers, which it looks like we are, and I know there's talk about Balak Wisha, and I think he missed training this week, and there's a bit of chat about he's closing in on a Celtic move as well. I don't think we quite have the breakthrough report on that yet, just in terms of it being so widespread. So we're still waiting on how that will go. But I think that those central three, I think, works as a unit, with the provision that Maeda can obviously play on the left as well at times. So it's an interesting one, Ryan. I think some people might be looking at this and thinking, could we have got a more established striker in Europe? Could we have got someone a bit more. I don't know, a bit more gravitas to them. I don't know. Maybe that's unfair on Yamada because I don't think Celtic fans should be squeamish about signing players from Japan because I think the hit rate is pretty good, and I think we've seen if they do hit form and especially the profile of a player who has been established in the J League and has been playing consistently in the J League and performed well in the J League and been a standout in the J League. Generally, they've come into Celtic and done pretty well. So I get that there's an uneasiness around this. I think there will be until people start seeing Yamada playing and see what he can offer. But I'm not totally against this either. It's a weird one, Ryan. I've got mixed feelings on it because I understand that. I understand the viewpoint that if Celtic are going to progress in this trading model, then at some point they have to make a next step and start attracting a higher quality of player that comes in. It's a higher base level of quality that comes in. And Yamada seems like someone we might have gone for 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, almost. And there's an argument, should Celtic have moved on at this point? I don't know what your feelings are around that.
I think you've got every right to feel mixed about it, but you look at the track record of Japanese players to come to Celtic, it's been pretty good. You think of Celtic's best attacker last season, Japanese, arguably Celtic's most creative midfielder last season, he's always as well. So Celtic have got, and people before, he had that down period, people were calling Kyogo the best striker since Henrik Larsson, and all these players came from the J League. They just needed that move, they needed that different environment to show how good they were, and now they're getting linked with big moves. I know that Kyogo's went down to Birmingham after a failed stint at Rennes. He'll probably tear up the Championship, in my opinion. You get Shin Yamada getting linked with moves. Ryo Tati's been linked with moves ever since he came to Celtic, it seems like. So these players are there, they just need that next step. And yeah, I think I'm more excited about this move due to the team that he's coming from as well.
Yeah,
traditionally,
that's a fair point.
Kawasaki are one of the top teams in Japan. They create good players. They also sell good players as well. I believe that Mitoma played for them before he went to Brighton and USG. So they've got a track record of making really good players and then selling them on to European teams. I think the fact that he's 25 as well is a good sign as well. He's plied his trade for a couple of years in the J League. It's not as if he's a young player. He's maybe young in terms of the Japanese model, but a 25-year-old coming is better than maybe a 21, 22-year-old coming. And there's not that immediate pressure on him to succeed as well because of the existing talent that Celtic have got up front. So I'm more positive about it. I'm thinking about it over the past couple of days. Japanese players, due to the good recent track history that Celtic have got with Japanese players, I'm pretty excited about it if he can get to those levels that he showed last season in the J League.
So, I mean, I know people are pointing that it's been a more difficult season for him this year. So, just for context, Shin Yamada has also had those years in the J League where he hasn't been quite as effective. In 2020, I think he made 23 appearances, I've got here, and he scored 3 goals. It was the next year, the 2021 J League season, he scored 23 goals in 36 appearances. Similar numbers to what Yamada had last season, and then that's when he won his move to Celtic, so he didn't regress into something else in the way that maybe Yamada has. I think that point about if we'd signed Yamada 6 months ago on the back of a really hot J League season, I think the perception around this signing would undoubtedly be different. So I guess it comes down to this thing of you judge players by what they do in a Celtic jersey, and I guess we have to wait and see on that. And I'm just hoping that this is something that Brendan Rodgers has bought into. We understand and we know that he wasn't fully, I think I've kind of described it as having these two baskets of transfers almost this summer, Ryan, where you've got these development players in one basket and then the players for Brendan Rodgers' team in another basket. I hope Brendan Rodgers has bought in on Yamada. That's all I would say about this. I hope it's one that Brendan Rodgers is excited about in the way that he's very much excited about Benjamin Nygren. He's said that on multiple occasions now. He's obviously very much excited about bringing Kieran Tierney into the club, and I hope he has a similar level of enthusiasm for Yamada, because I think when you're talking about the basket of first team signings, I think that's when the manager and the recruitment and the scouting staff have to be very, very aligned. The development basket is one thing, and Brendan Rodgers might have, a long-term view of that, or might not quite, have a full understanding of what their game is or how they fit into the team there, that's fine because that's more speculative. But the first team basket is so important that Brendan Rodgers is all in on it.
Yeah, and it seems as if that's the point that he made a couple of months ago is ringing true, where he said it might be easier for Celtic to bring in wingers, top class wingers, than a top class striker, out and out poacher. So maybe that's where the funds are going to go to. Obviously, we know that Kuhn is in Italy, or he was in Italy a couple of days ago to finalise his deal to Como. I guess we're just waiting on a confirmation of when that is officially signed and sealed. So it would seem as if a lot of the money, maybe the money that's coming from that deal, will get spent on the wide positions. Now I know that Benjamin Negrin can play out wide, but he can also play in the number 10 position, quite a fluid attacker, can play in a multitude of positions. But it seems as if that could be the area where money's spent. Shin Yamada, he might not even be the only striker that comes in. You never know with the way that this season is going, or the way this pre-season is going. Maybe there is going to be all change in the striking position. A couple of players will move out, and then another striker will come in. But I'm quite happy that, as I said before, that the Japanese link is still there, that Celtic are going for it, and the fact that he had such a good season last season. It's not as if he's a complete project player. The proof is in the pudding there of last season. He was one of the top scorers. I was looking there as you were speaking. Kawasaki are having a difficult season themselves. So are Yokohama F Marinos. It's a bit of a change in the J League at the moment. I think the Marinos are actually facing relegation halfway through the season. They're in the relegation spots. Kawasaki are 6 at the moment. So it might have just been a difficult season for all involved in Kawasaki. And yeah, I'm looking forward to digging in a little bit deeper on Yamada, seeing what he's good at, maybe what he's not so good at, and what Celtic can do to improve him as he moves into his prime years as a striker. As I said before, it looks like a when rather than an if with this player coming in after his international stint with Japan. So yeah, I think it's about time we all get acquainted with him, because it seems like he'll be Celtic's next striker.
Yeah, sure, and I think people will be hoping he might get some minutes for Japan over the next few days as well, so we can get a current look at him. I know that Yamada's also played, and we've talked about this, maybe not with yourself, Ryan, but I've certainly have over the last couple of weeks of potential tactical changes and formation changes. I believe Yamada's played primarily, and I just saw someone in the chat kind of mention this, it reminded me of it. Yamada's played primarily in a 4-2-3-1, just so people know, which is another interesting subplot to all this.
Yep.
Now, Brendan Rodgers made an interesting comment after the Cork game where he was discussing Luke McCowan's goal, where he says he's told the midfielders to push up more and make more runs into the box and be more aggressive in their forward play and commit more to forward runs. And he specifically asked that of his midfield this summer, which is an interesting note when he's talking about making tweaks, etc. I think he wants that midfield unit to be a more creative and fluent attacking force, as he said. And I think that's where Negrin fits in, doesn't he? I see Negrin as being more of a central player for Celtic. I know he played the vast majority of his games on the right side for Nordsjælland, but he and I spoke about this to the guy in the Casper de Lind on the channel in the video. When you're just thinking about, when I play about Negrin, I think positions are almost a little bit reductive in a similar way where you wouldn't really say Greg Taylor was a left back. Do you know what I mean? I think Negrin will be very much someone who is having an influence on the central areas of the pitch, and I think it is going to be interesting. I think we're going to see a slightly different looking Celtic team going into the season, and I'm excited to see how that pans out across these games in Portugal with the more established players back, and then against Newcastle, etc. Hopefully we see more of that, and we do see a more aggressive attacking midfield, because I think a little bit last year Engels and Bernardo a little bit stuck in a kind of mode, a deeper mode, very not like Matt O'Reilly, for example, who was just an absolute sensation the year prior. I think we need that back. We need that back in the Celtic midfield this season.
Yeah, goals and creativity is important for Celtic, because, you know, as much as the wings are scoring goals, you need the midfield to be scoring goals as well. You lost a lot of goals last season when you took the team. Obviously went to Brighton for a good fee, but you lost a lot of goals and assists. And yes, some players did step up and got double digits in goals and assists, like Arne Engels, etc. But you wanted a little bit more. You wanted maybe 15, 20 from a player. As much as you like to see the goals all spread about and the assists all spread about, You want to see players individually thriving as well, like Matt O'Reilly did. I think it's a big season for Arne Engels. So if you can get good players around him, not to say that he hasn't had good players around him, but players that suit his style of play, he might even move back a bit to allow Nygren to play further forward. I think long term, Engels could be a number 8 role, and if Nygren's a more attacking player that can maybe drift out to the right on occasions but play in that attacking midfield role, then there could be a good partnership formed. But Celtic have got options in the midfield. I'd desperately love to see Hatate stay for another season. It's all about what teams come in for him this summer, and more specifically what time they come in for him, because it might not suit Celtic to lose him so close to qualifiers, etc. But if he can stay another season, then absolutely brilliant. But if not, then the likes of Nygren could maybe have a free run at it and solidify himself in that Celtic midfield, or outright, depending on where Rodgers sees him. But there's definitely food for thought for Brendan Rodgers. Now is the time to experiment and tinker. You've got the game against Australia, you get the game against Sporting Club as well. So these are the games to experiment ahead of the new season, and you've got players to do that. And with new players and new play styles gives new opportunities for the team. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in action starting on Saturday.
And just go back to your other point. So I know you mentioned Brendan Rodgers said it can be more difficult to sign this top level striker than it is to sign a top level winger. So do you think there's going to be more investment in the wide areas? Is that your feeling on it, and kind of how you're looking at it, that we might see a bigger budget for those wide areas? But if not Balikwisha, then another.
Yeah, I think there'll be 2 wingers coming, to be honest with you, because I think that Yamada will play up front for some games, will play up front in some games this season. I think you've also got to factor in the fact that Jota is injured, but he will come back at some point in the season, January, February, so you don't want to sign too many players, and then you've got an overflow of wide talent. You've got Nicholas Kuhn, who's, we all expect that move to be finalised in the next couple of days, so that frees up a space. People are maybe thinking that Nygren could be that player that plays out on the right, but if he's playing as more of an attacking midfielder, there frees up a spot there for a right midfielder, in for the likes of Orgesetter. There was links with him in January. I know that PSV were sniffing around him a couple of weeks ago when I was last on. I know there's been no movement on that since then. So I think they'll definitely need 1 wide player, maybe 2. But I want that money that's getting given to Celtic for Nicholas Kuhn's services to be reinvested in those wide areas in order for goals to come, because you're losing the goals and assists in Nicholas Kuhn, and that in 2 seasons, losing Matt O'Reilly's goals and assists and then Nicholas Kuhn's goals and assists, that's a lot of goals to make up for. So you're going to need a volume winger this summer that can make things happen and score goals from wide positions. And that's what the scouting team, that's what Paul Tisdale and his scouts have got to identify, a player that can come in and immediately make that impact in the wide areas, both left and right hand side.
Yeah, that is a thought. I mean, I think losing, I've been talking about the Kuhn deal, and I think a lot of people have very positively, because I think ultimately it's a good, it's just, it feels right in many respects, just purely,
agreed.
if nothing, for nothing else, that Kuhn clearly wanted the move, and you don't keep a player who wants a move, so that in itself is a sign that it had to happen. But you make a point there. I mean, I think a move like that is only good for Celtic if Celtic then progress from it. And I think I made this point the other day as well. It's like a selling model's fine, but it's all about how you respond to it and if you can take a next level beyond it, And so I'm looking for someone who is of a higher quality than Kuhn, frankly, to come into the club. And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on the club to just go bring in someone who's better than your 21 goal winger. But, if not in actual productivity, but just in terms of profile and career trajectory to date, I agree with some people who think we can't always be around the £3 to £5 million mark. I think at some point we need to commit to players. And I know it's more of a risk, and I know there's chat about maybe did we spend too much on Arne Engels, what's his debut season in relation to the money that we've spent on him, etc., etc. But you have to commit to these higher ceiling players, I think, at some point. And so perhaps that's what I'm looking for Celtic's next winger. Whether that pans out that way, who knows?
I've got to say, I think it's riskier keep continuing to shop in that £2-3 million market for players that might not be up to it and playing for Celtic. I think it's better if you sign players for 6-7 million that have that pedigree, that you know that they can come in. You know, not every player is going to come in and immediately for 6, 7, 8 million and be the real deal. You know, Arne Engels, I think we all expect a big season from him. He's had that season to acclimatise, and now we expect, with a full pre-season under his belt, to really thrive in the Celtic midfield. But I think there's less risk the more you spend on a player. I know with financials, Celtic are in a really good place financially, but I think if you're signing a player that's got goals and assists for 6, 7, 8 million, then the chances are that they'll be able to do that in the Scottish Premiership as well, and especially in Europe in the qualifiers, in a game that Celtic will likely be favourites for, to get to the league phase of the Champions League. It's important to get the player in, get them acclimatised, get them playing at Celtic Park against Newcastle preferably, playing in the Cobo Cup, playing a couple of games in the domestic season, getting their goal scoring off to a good start, and then playing in that Champions League qualifier. It's a massive game, and I want all of Celtic's pieces to be in. I know it's an ideal situation. In an ideal world, you get all your players in for that Champions League qualifier, but it's so important that Celtic are ready for that game, and they've got players that can hurt the opposition and make that tie not as easy as possible, but you know, as straightforward to get through and get into that league phase of the Champions League. So I think the more that you spend, the less risk that you've got that they can come good, and make an impact for Celtic in those big games to come.
A lot of people discussing the Yamada deal in the context of Brendan Rodgers' happiness, and I think that I you know, for whatever you think about the deal, I do think that's going a bit over the top, because I you know, we'll see how it pans out, but it's too early to make any definitive statements on Brendan Rodgers hates his signing, etc, etc, etc. Just everyone, I think, just take a breath and just, we'll figure out what Yamada is, and we'll figure out how Brendan Rodgers feels about it as we go. There's no point in going two-footed on this before it pans out. I just don't believe in that. I'm of the belief that you judge something in hindsight rather than prejudge something. There's a lot of prejudging goes on at this time of year with Celtic. Prejudging of Celtic's season, prejudging of Celtic's intent, prejudging of the quality coming in. The reality is that it's an unknown, but for some people an unknown is an anxiety thing, Ryan. For me, an unknown at this time of year is quite exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing Nygren. I'm looking forward to seeing Tierney back in the team and what he offers now. If Yamada comes in and signs up, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I'm not really that scared of the unknowns, and the reason I'm not scared of the unknowns, Ryan, is because for the vast majority of our time over the last decade plus, the unknowns have generally worked out pretty well for Celtic.
I remember the unknown coming into a game. I know he'd made his debut against Hearts in the first game of the season, but going to watch Kyogo for the first time against Dundee and him scoring a hat-trick in his home debut, you know, that was an unknown. And then at full time, everybody coming out of the stadium, I remember it was only a partially full stadium because we were just coming out of lockdown at that time, but that unknown then turned to an automatic hero. And who's to say the same can't happen to a player like Yamada? Maybe he's just outgrown his time at Kawasaki. He needs that move, needs that freshness, and once he gets to Celtic, he might start banging in the goals. Again, yeah, I completely agree with you. A lot of these players came in to Celtic as unknowns, but they left them as modern day heroes, the likes of Matt O'Reilly. No one had really heard of Matt O'Reilly before he came to Celtic. You might have heard him if you looked at the Bloom Academy and then what he was doing at MK Dons, but he came into Celtic as virtually unknown, and he left a £25 million player. These players have to start from somewhere, and you know, this could be Yamada's opportunity in Europe. Japanese players coming through, they're waiting for that big opportunity to really highlight the Japanese game on the European stage. And if it is to be Yamada, and it looks as if it will be, then I think he'll put in 100% to make sure that he's a success at Celtic. And those people that are going to watch him need to back him and hope that he can bring similar levels that Maeda, that Hatate and Kyogo have, his predecessors.
It also strikes me, Ryan, that when Celtic make a £1.5 million signing, that's far too cheap. But Celtic are in the bargain basement. If Celtic make a £10 million signing, that's far too dear. You're spending far too much money on one player. It's like everyone's like, unless it's a £5 or £6 million player, everyone's like in a tizzy about it almost.
That was the point with the winger over the past couple of days that seems to be going to Nice from Rapid Vienna, because Celtic were getting linked with a £2-3 million move and people were labelling him as too cheap. All of a sudden then he gets linked to Nice for 9-10 million euros, and people are saying that's too expensive. So you're seeing the different factors at play. Maybe we just need to stick to £6 million signings, and then everybody will be happy in that happy medium.
Yeah. Again, it's just one of those things. I don't think Celtic care about that stuff. That's like I think Celtic.
No.
I don't think Brendan Rodgers cares about the perception. It's all about results on the pitch. Everyone, like, that's what matters. It's all about what we see on the pitch in a Celtic shirt.
Absolutely.
That is ultimately what will be the test and the success or failure of these signings. And we can scream about strategy and budgets and all that until then, but really it's about the players playing on the pitch. And until we see that, there's not much we can get too angry about, I think. I know. And I think if Yamada doesn't work out and this transfer window becomes a disaster or whatever, but then we'll say so when it pans out in that sense. But I do think this prejudgment is sometimes a little bit too much for me, personally. And I understand it because it, football's an emotional sport. Supporters are emotional about their club. They want the very best for the club. I get where people are coming from, but just for me personally, it just gets a little bit too much.
I think perspective is so key as well. You look at this time last year, it was very similar motions from supporters last year at how slow the deals were getting done. By this point last year, I think they hadn't even made a signing yet. I think it was the middle of July before the likes of Sinisalo and Kasper Schmeichel even came to the club. I know that they didn't have qualifiers to contend with. At this point, Celtic have 5-6 signings already through the door, so they have been busier than this time last year. So I think perspective is required. Maybe that quality hasn't came through as of yet, or supposed quality, but they have been busy in the transfer window. I think they've made some smart signings. Tierney coming back, doing for the homegrown quota, good third choice goalkeeper, international goalkeeper as well. Nygren, they seem to have got on. He seems to be a £5-6 million player, but due to his contract, Celtic have got him on the cheap. So yeah, I'm choosing to be positive at this time, John. Maybe it's because I've been on holiday for the past 2.5 weeks, but I'm feeling pretty positive at this moment in time. Confident about what's going to happen this season. But yeah, you do want to see some more business over the next couple of weeks to really strengthen the squad further.
And as I say, it's that so you're talking about the signings coming in. As I say, it's the first team signings we need to see, and we need Rodgers to be all in on those. So I'm wanting the messaging from Rodgers. I'm looking at that over the next while, because you can read into Brendan Rodgers' comments and you can read between the lines on it from time to time, especially when he's away on these trips and he's given little comments, little sentences here and there. So let's see what he's saying over the next couple of days. And we're positive today, and you know what will happen. We'll get horsed by this Australia Day Amadora side on Saturday. We'll all be raging. But yeah, no, I think we'll leave it there today. There'll be more. We've got more on the site coming on Yamada today. We'll be back tomorrow morning. I think I'm on with Josh, so we'll be chatting a bit more about that. And yeah, we'll be back. We'll be doing more live shows at the weekend. I think we're going to have a reaction to the Australia Day Amadora game, which is live on Celtic TV. If you don't know, it's taking place at the Benfica training stadium. It's behind closed doors. It's very much going to be a training game. I think there's going to be a lot of rotation in the team in the match, not just at half time, but potentially mid halves as well. So it's not going to be a really structured 90-minute game, Ryan. I think it's going to be. I've seen in the past Celtic have had weird kind of. I think maybe it was maybe in the COVID, after the preparation for the COVID year, where Lennon had 30-minute games or something, like 3 30-minute matches. So yeah, so I wonder if I'm interested to see if it'll be something like that, considering it's behind closed doors. It could be a bit experimental, but as we say, it's live on Celtic TV, and we'll be live with our reaction as well, giving our impressions on the match.
Yeah, and I've got to say, on a positive note, I'm glad that game is getting televised, because I think it's important for people to see these training games in action as well. As much as it'll be a competitive enough game against, I think this team are in the second division of Portuguese football. I like to see these training games because it'll show you, it'll be able to. It allows Celtic TV to showcase more players, especially if there's more getting used. If they are getting used in those 30-minute intervals, I know we're just speculating, but if you can see 3 different teams, then it'll give more of an idea on what players are, maybe behind in the pecking order and what they can bring to the team. I think everybody's quite excited to see the likes of Tierney and Nygren on Saturday. Hopefully the two of them get some minutes. By all accounts, Brendan Rodgers is pretty excited by Nygren, so I think we should be too. especially if he has a good performance on Saturday. That's who I'm most looking forward to seeing on Saturday, personally.
Again, it's just funny as well, just the discussion around Inamura. Everyone was slating the Inamura sign-in, and then he has a good half against Cork City, and everyone's saying he's the signing of the summer. So
yeah, that was very weird, checking my phone on Tuesday midway through a gig and hearing that Inamura is the best thing since Paolo Maldini, basically.
Yeah.
That was odd, but it was enjoyable at the same time.
What the point I'm making is perception change quickly at this time of year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we'll be here every turn of the way. As I say, we'll be covering it all with the latest on celticway.co.uk and also here on the YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone in the live chat. Thanks in your comments below if you're leaving us thoughts. Give us your thoughts on Shin Yamada. I want to know what I want to know what the mood music is on Shin Yamada. So leave a comment below if you have thoughts either way, strongly or negative about this, because it's important to get all views heard and represented. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Ryan. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Myself and Josh back on the Celtic Way. Goodbye.